Hey everybody, welcome back to Sounds Like a Drum, Cadence Independent Media Production, Snare Spotlight Edition. Today we're talking about this beautiful, beautiful drum from Independent Drum Lab. If you are familiar with our show, you know that we talk about snare drums probably more than any other drum. They're kind of the middle of the kit. They're kind of a defining sound of a lot of recordings that we've heard. You can sometimes identify the era of a recording you're hearing based on the sound of just the snare drum by itself. And one of the things that we look for in snare drums these days especially is versatility from each instrument. And this drum from Independent Drum Lab is really, really amazing, and I'm super excited to talk about it. There are a lot of details to cover, so we're going to kind of go through them, and we're also going to do kind of a lot of playing in comparison today. Before we jump into any of those many details, let's hear it a little bit at like a medium-high tuning. First off, it definitely sounds like a drum. It sounds like a great drum. Right out of the gate, it made me want to play particularly like 90s metal stuff. And it reminds me of some other metal drums that I've played, but there are some components going on here, both in the sound and the construction too, that's resulting in that sound that are unique to this instrument. And it's been really fascinating to get to know it. So first off, what is this drum? Independent Drum Lab is the builder. This is a Kalamazoo Series snare drum, which is named after the town that they're based out of in Michigan. And it is a metal drum. It is basically a patinaed bronze shell, and it has straight bearing edges that are just meeting the head straight up and down. There's no rollover on them at all. The shell is 1.5 millimeters thick, which is a little bit thinner than a modern Superphonic or a Black Beauty, but it's in the ballpark for those sorts of drums, though those instruments do have a rolled over edge. It has 8 lugs. It has chrome over brass triple flange hoops on it right now. It has their in-house designed strainer and butt plate mechanism that we have already featured in a couple of other episodes. And today it is sporting Aquarian texture-coated batter, 3mm snare side, and 20-strand, pretty standard Pure Sound custom wires. Now, it's not uncommon to see special appointments on custom-made drums. They go one step further. They actually have their own lugs, too, which is a little more unusual. We've seen tons of beautiful custom drums with just run-of-the-mill tube lugs. These low-mass lugs are also designed by INDe. And they look great, they feel great, the feel of the tension rods going into them is super duper smooth. And they are just one more thing that lets you know that they really put a lot of thought into this aesthetically as well as functionally. Now, the design of the shell is hand-rolled and riveted at one point, kind of in the front where the badge is located, and you can see that. It's very clean, it's engineered beautifully. There are no rattles or any funny business. I know that, seeing rivets on a drum shell might be unusual or different to people who are accustomed to a seamless shell or some kind of weld or something like that. And this works perfectly and makes for a very strong bond. Now, there is one aspect of this drum that is so unusual that we've actually never seen it, and it is actually patent pending for this company, and it is what they call the infinite snare bed. We've really talked a lot about snare beds on this show, and we've gone through a lot of different sorts. We've got drums that don't have them at all. This one has something that, again, is totally new to me, and that is a snare bed that doesn't really have an end. You have the point that is the deepest of the snare bed where the wires cross, and then it slopes evenly up to meet the other snare bed. So basically the entire bottom side of the drum is snare bed, and that means that you have a different kind of flexibility with tuning the bottom head, both for sensitivity and resonance and anything else that you might be after, because you don't have to accommodate the shape of the snare bed right where the snare wires are. If you've ever had a drum that had very narrow or very deep or very narrow and deep snare beds, there's just a slew of things that can make it more challenging to tune a drum with that construction than one with smoother or more gentle or slightly wider beds. In addition to the fact that the width and depth of the snare bed influences what wires you could use. You may not be able to put 42s on a drum with a super narrow bed. With something like this, it's essentially maximizing the versatility of that side of the drum. Now, if you've been watching us for a long time, or if you've gone back to older videos, you've probably seen me level the snare side head with a ruler. I did that with this drum initially, and I played it a little bit, and I heard a phenomenon that I am familiar with, which I've experienced with a couple of other drums that also had what I would say just are like different than run-of-the-mill snare beds. And that was just that having the height be even of the hoop with the ruler method, and episode 1, if you want to see it, we have a couple of different videos that have that in it. It was getting me actually too much resonance in the drum. Like the drum was making such a big note that I was wanting more articulation. And one of the ways that I tune drums, particularly 8-lug drums, I will increase tension on the screws that are not adjacent to the wires, rather the 2 screws on each side that are away from the wires. And what that does is it changes the distribution of tension on the snare side head. With just a little bit of tweaking of those outside lugs, I ended up with an extremely sensitive, but also plentifully resonant sound at a variety of tuning ranges that we were definitely shocked to hear. And now, using that, we're going to segue into exactly what I was talking about. And I don't normally do this, but just for clarity purposes and so you can imagine the experience of this, from the first tuning that we heard earlier, I am going to lower the top head and the bottom head half a turn. That's it. That will be basically our lowest tuning that we go to with this drum. Okay, now right out of the gate, I want to get ahead of this. That's a lot of overtones. It's very resonant and it feels pretty wild. And especially if we are accustomed to hearing our drums alone, it might seem like a lot. However, and this is borne out by drums alone audio and videos that I've heard on the internet of recordings that I'm familiar with, Soundgarden, Nirvana, lots of things. Those overtones are the first thing to disappear in a mix, especially with amplified guitars and anything with distortion on it. The behavior of this drum at this tension really sounds like drums that I associate with being at their best when they're tuned this way. Acrylites, some kind of thin-shelled wood drums, maybe mahogany or something like that, that has a low fundamental that it wants to let out. We've also talked about a lot that resonance equals fatness. It means sustain in your drums. So that means that if you want to get a fat sound, but you don't want to have overtones, you have to go here first. Well, have to, I mean, I think that you have to, because you need the drum to want to do this before you put a little muffling on it, which is what we're going to do now to get to a little bit drier of a tone, a little bit less sustained, but that girthy kind of fat sound. Now that feels like a completely different sound. It was the exact same tuning. I didn't change the tension of the wires. I didn't change anything. And all of a sudden it became like a Levon Helm thing or like a Steve Jordan track or something instead of that explosive, sustainy, ringy thing. It's beautiful. And not all drums will do this in a way that's usable. And when we talk about range, it really only counts if you can use it. You know, any drum can be tuned low or high, but having those sounds be good, that's a little harder. All right, now we're going to do an experiment. I'm going to raise the batter up a whole turn, and I'm going to leave the bottom head where it was. So from the first tuning, The bottom head, the snare side, is down a half turn, and now this batter is going to be up a half turn from the initial tuning at the top of the video. Now this is where we can really talk about tuning versatility. A versatile drum should allow you to have usable sounds without having to mirror tensions of both of the heads throughout the spectrum that you're tuning it. They shouldn't have to have the same interval between them to make a usable sound. When I sat down to start to go to high tunings, I tuned the batter and I hit it and I was like, well, that sounds awesome, and I didn't change the bottom, so let's record that. Totally works. Now, let's talk about versatility where we don't change the batter head and we raise the snare side up an entire turn now. So now we're a half turn up on both of them from the very first tuning. Again, totally different sound. I didn't change the batter. There was one head. And you do have to change the tension on the wires a little bit because you're pulling the collar away, from the strap or string. So there's a little bit of adjustment there to make sure it's still giving you articulation. But now we're in an upper range. It's sounding really good. And it's also one of those kind of minor adjustments where if those are the two sounds you're caught in between, you can just fuss with the snare side and it completely changes it. And again, not all drums will do this. Good drums will, but even not all good drums will do this through this kind of range either. Now, the fun part. I'm going to tune this drum as high as I can, like that I feel is safe and not going to break the heads, and we're going to see what that does. I bet that anybody you show a recording of that to who can't see it would never ever guess that it was a 6.5 by 14 bronze drum with only 8 lugs. It's really high, it's really bright, it's really clear, and also, and this is important, it feels awesome to hit. It doesn't feel choked. Articulation to the edge of the head to, I would say, an orchestral degree is going on here for sure. A little piece of moleskin in there and you'd be good to go with standard wires. I mean, I have no idea what would happen if you started really getting into different wires. We left this exactly as it came. I just tuned it. I didn't change anything else. If you are thinking in terms of wanting a drum that will do a lot of stuff and do all of those things incredibly well without even getting into like a lot of different kinds of muffling or messing with wires or heads, you really can't go further than what this instrument will do. A big part of the experience of playing this drum and this versatility that we're talking about is owed to the straight shell with no flanges at the end, no center bead, nothing like that. We have had drums in before that have straight shells that have differences to this one. It might have been additional wood bearing edges with one. If you watch the old video of my Keplinger snare, that's a straight shell, but it's much thicker than this. There's a lot going on with that, but when you're thinking in terms of resonance and sustain, a straight shell is giving you the least amount of contact and the most opportunity for there to be sustained, which is why the low has so much overtone. And you have to maybe do a little bit of muffling to kind of like calm it down. But then on the flip side, it doesn't choke when it is absolutely cranked. And I mean really cranked. If you're up for taking a single instrument and really getting into all the things that it'll do, this is the sort of instrument that's going to give you a lot of opportunities for totally different sounds that, to me, I mean, with it in front of me with my eyes closed, they sound like different drums. I wouldn't think of them as being the same instrument. Now, just to have a really clean comparison between all of this, we're going to do 5 clean hits at all of the tunings that we went through today so you can hear how it behaves at all of these different tensions. If you haven't done it already, jump over to their website. There's a link in the description below the video to check these drums out. You might be surprised how affordable they are considering all of the custom options and all the things you can get and the actual sound produced by these instruments. It's a wonderful company, and they are exactly what we like to see out there. People trying to be innovative, trying to make something amazing that really just gets the job done. No frills, no craziness. And, you know, these are the things we need to support right now, like companies like this. That about wraps it up. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell below so you get notifications about all of our new videos. In addition to our Tuesday tutorials, we're doing snare spotlights. We've got a lot of other things coming down the pipe right now. Special Patreon exclusive things. Head over there, check that out. Again, link below for that. If you are a drum builder and you're interested in having your drum put under the microscope here, we would love to do it. Please get in contact with us, and we're just going to keep these coming.